the first episode of the Mahatmyam. So what's happened is there is a king and there is a merchant. And these guys, so the king got kicked out of his kingdom by, some of his people that were working with him, decided that they didn't want to work with him, and he ends up in exile. And so this merchant, who was a successful merchant, his family kind of, I guess sort of stabbed him in the back or whatever. And so they both are in exile, and they are wandering in like the wilderness, and they come upon, the two of them happen upon the ashram, the place of this rishi. And first of all, they meet each other, and they're like, one is like, I was a king, I was this successful business guy, and we both are like sad because we've been kicked out of our place, and they decide to ask this rishi for help. And one thing that I've noticed about that, like the thing that I kind of think that may be, because there's like the story, and then there's plenty of people, there's lots of commentaries on the Mahatmyam that, these have like a deeper symbolic meaning. And so in some ways, I really think that each of us has, like, the merchant is like how we're going to make it in this world, like we got to eat, we got to have a place to live, all of that. And then the king part is what we're going to do to give back to humanity. So it's kind of like your dharma and your like everyday where you're going to make a living. Is this something that I've wondered about, and maybe that's why I see it that way, but it's something I've wondered about since I was a kid, is like, do you do what you love to make a living? Because if you do that, then you might end up not loving it so much, and then you might end up not doing it as well as you would otherwise. But so then how do you make a living without like killing your spirit, that kind of conflict. And so that's what I think, that the merchant and the king both like live inside of us. And so they talk to the rishi about it, and the rishi says, well, that is the whole way this whole world works. And he gives an example about how like a bird, even though maybe this bird is starving, is still feeding its babies, and that all of nature is kind of in a maya, it's an illusion, and or a, like kind of misperception, I guess, not illusion, but we're misperceiving things. And the idea of like being kicked out by your family, that's like one of the yogic things of like identifying with a certain like caste or family, and learning how to kind of overcome that tie is, like a yogic thing, as well as also like a king, where he's got all these subjects and all of these followers. That is another kind of like cutting of ties of approval. So like not being afraid to do what you think is right, whether other people are going to follow you or not. Those two concerns, like the concern for family and the concern for approval, that those are two things that we struggle with. And so the rishi says, these ties, these things that we think we're bound by, are part of this grand kind of misperception, which is Maya. And so he says, I'll tell you a story about the power of Maya. And he tells them the first story. So that's the way the Mahatmyam gets started, is, that these two guys, the merchant and the king, kicked out, and they're wandering in the woods, and they come upon this rishi, and the rishi is like, yeah, I can help you with this. Let me tell you this story. So he tells us the story of the first episode. And so in the